corruption intensifies as federal government launches financial transparency policy.
President Buhari to participate in Peace and Development Forum in Egypt.
Senate moves to address electricity challenge, convenes roundtable discussion with critical stakeholders.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss pension entitlements for governors and deputy governors.
You know, Kisley, the pension for former governors and deputies has become one of the issues for discourse in recent times in Nigeria.
That's true. And of course, this was triggered by a leaked letter coming from a former governor of Zamfara State demanding the arrears of what we refer to as upkeep allowance amounting to 10 million naira monthly.
Yes,
adverse public reactions eventually led to the repeal of that pension law by the Zamfara State House of Assembly.
Exactly, Kisley. Zamfara State is the first to abolish the law that mandates state governments to pay pension and other allowances to former governors and deputies, as well as former speakers and deputies.
Well, of course, this development generated reactions by Nigerians on the legality or otherwise of former governors drawing billions of naira from state coffers in the name of pension and other allowances, when public and civil servants who served meritoriously for 35 years do not get their entitlements, and even if they do, not always timeously.
You know, concerned over the situation, Kisley, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, filed a suit in which it prayed the court to stop state governments from implementing the jumbo pay as pensions, more so that most of the former governors are serving as members of the National Assembly or ministers or holding other positions in government.
And of course, the Federal High Court sitting in Lagos in its wisdom granted the prayers of SERAP and directed the federal government to recover such pensions already paid to the former governors, deputies, speakers and deputy speakers, as the case may be.
I know, Kisley, if you may recall that the former governors and deputies, as well as other ex-public officials, had collected billions of naira in the last 2 decades as pension and upkeep allowances from their various states, thereby putting the states in a bad economic situation.
Well, as a follow-up to the court order, just yesterday we learned that SERAP has already sent a freedom of information request to various state governments to, quote, urgently disclose details of payments of pension to former governors and other ex-officials between 1999 and 2019 under their respective pension laws, unquote.
The organizations also asked each of the 36 state governors to provide information on whether any such pension law exists in their states, and if so, they should provide the names and number of ex-governors and other ex-officials that have been receiving such pensions.
Now, SERAP also wants the states to publicly commit to repealing any such law and also to pursue the recovery of the funds already collected under the pension law. Now, of course, there are many questions arising from all of this development, and includes whether or not the beneficiaries of the largesse will be willing to refund such monies already collected so far, and what are the likely modalities for the recovery of such pensions paid. Of course, there are arguments that, yes, the pensions were paid under laws validly made, but analysts have also raised the question whether it is morally right for the former governors, former deputies, and other former officials to collect such jumbo pay as pensions when, once again, retired public servants are being owed their entitlements. And what steps should also be taken to repeal the relevant law in other states that haven't followed in the footsteps of Zamfara State? Will the state legislators have the courage, as it were, to abolish such laws? This is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and welcome to the program.
And I am Jumwe Yusuf. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, broadcasting live on the network service of the NTA in Abuja, the nation's capital. We shall, as usual, bring you some of the complimentary segments of the program, including newspaper review, business, sports, and others. For now, let's join Naja Atut Jani for the morning news. Good morning, Naja.
Good morning, Jumai and Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. To give further impetus to the federal government's anti-corruption drive and sanitize the public service in Nigeria, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, under the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, has inaugurated an internet-based financial transparency policy and open treasury portal.
In addition to the responsibility for publication outlined above, all MDAs are required to promptly respond to additional requests for information beyond what is published.
Actions were undertaken to ensure full appreciation of the implications of the policy. In addition, following the approval of the policy by the Federal Executive Council, the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has undertaken significant preparations to ensure readiness for its implementation.
Meanwhile, Nigeria has joined the global community to mark this year's United Nations International Anti-Corruption Day, focusing on the fight against corruption in the maritime sector. At a national summit in Abuja, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, and agencies in the maritime sector called for a collective approach in the fight against corruption in the country.
If corruption is not fought to a standstill, it is no exaggeration to state that the maritime and transportation industry is pivotal to the growth of the economy of any country. It is critical to the ease of doing business, both with local and foreign investors. It is in realization of this that my administration has, over the last 4 years, embarked on audacious reforms of the economy, and the benefits are already visible for all.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the composition of a new board for the Federal Inland Revenue Service, subject to Senate confirmation. In a statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, the President nominated a renowned tax consultant, Muhammad M. Nami, as the new chairman. The board is composed of a member representing each of the 6 geographical zones and statutory representatives from a select number of ministries and government agencies. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari will depart Abuja today for Aswan, Egypt, to attend the Aswan Forum designed to set an agenda for sustainable peace and development in Africa. A statement by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, says the forum, which holds December 11 to 12, is an initiative to address the interconnections between peace and development in Africa, while promoting Africa-led solutions through strengthening policies and practices. The gathering is expected to bring together heads of state and government, leaders from regional and international organizations, financial institutions, private sector and civil societies, as well as scholars, visionaries and prominent experts for action-oriented discussions on the threats, challenges and opportunities. It is also expected to end with a declaration on the theme of the forum and become an annual event. The President will be accompanied by Governors Ahmadu Fintiri of Adamawa, Godwin Obaseki of Edo and Mai Malabuni of Yobe State. Others are Minister of Defense General Bashir Magashi, Minister of State Foreign Affairs Ambassador Zubairu Dada, National Security Advisor Major General Babagana Monguno, and the Director General National Intelligence Agency Ambassador Ahmad Rufai Abubakar. President Buhari is expected back in Abuja on Friday. The challenge of attaining a stable and sustainable power supply in Nigeria has been topical for quite some time now. This time, the 9th Senate has taken it upon itself to solve the puzzle. Its efforts culminated in convening a roundtable discussion involving the Senate, Ministries of Power, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and experts in electrical installations.
That we have to come and tell ourselves the truth, look into each other's eyes, and say the truth, so that we can come to grips with the major issues that have been bedeviling this sector.
The industry has not charged cost-reflective tariffs, so that has built up. This has led to low remittance to GENCOs for energy supplied. GENCOs have been unable to meet their GSA, that's the gas supply agreement obligations. This has led to power availability drop.
The time has come to look into it. Whatever we have to do to review these things, we should do. We must go, really.
Still on legislative matters, the House of Representatives says the number of air crashes involving the Nigerian Air Force in non-combat operations, which have led to loss of lives and military equipment, is a source of worry to stakeholders. The House therefore opened an inquiry to find lasting solutions.
We have resolved to assess the level of financial loss suffered by the country due to these crashes and examine the utility of insurance coverage in reimbursing the government for losses.
In terms of spare parts and other maintenance issues, we have made substantial progress from 2015 when the serviceability status of flyable aircraft was only 35%. But today, as at this morning, as I leave the office, the serviceability status is 70, and it has always been between 70 and 82%.
And on to health matters. A meeting between the First Lady of Nigeria, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, and Governor's Wives Coalition on Reproductive Health has ended in Abuja with a 7-point communique aimed at scaling up efforts towards the promotion of reproductive, maternal, newborn and adolescent health, as well as nutrition in Nigeria.
Let me one more reaffirm my commitment to champion RMNCAH plus nutrition through advocacy and public awareness interventions. I implore you to also continue doing the same in your various states. To our new sisters, I would like to also encourage you to be committed to this noble cause.
That the counsels and recommendations of the Governor's Wives should be among the prioritized actions in programming in order to achieve optimal results.
And those are the news highlights for now. The program continues with Jummai and Kingsley after the break.
In today's world, it's tough being a woman. But thanks to So Clean, Nigeria's #1 detergent with stain magnet technology, doing washing is a whole lot faster and smarter too. Only So Clean has stain magnet technology with an advanced enzyme formula that pulls out even the toughest trapped dirt, just like powerful magnets. No wonder Nigerians love So Clean. So Clean, for a faster, brighter, cleaner wash.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Kogi Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnerships with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Studio 24, Delta Airlines, Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogiafrica.tv. Kogi Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country. Greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down.
Do you have a job where you're going to? No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin.
I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
My name is Yemi Adetunji, the COO downstream of NNPC. Ever since the closure of the borders, we have seen a marked reduction, about 10%, in terms of the evacuation of what you call loadouts of PMS, which equates to about 6 million liters per day, essentially because of the border closure and because of certain aspects we've also done as NNPC, working with our sister organizations, sister agencies, Nigerian Customs, DPR, Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and other agencies, and also what we call Operation White, which is an intervention we have put in place to trace and track every molecule of petroleum products as they arrive in country through the vessels, as they move through the depots, and as they're evacuated with trucks out of the depots.
Thanks for rejoining us. The Accountant General of the Federation says enrollment on IPPIS for all federal civil servants is sacrosanct. Plus, efforts are on to review upward national crude reserve to 40 billion barrels by the year 2030. Details with Kolo Mohammed on Business News.
Good morning. It's good to have you along. Nigeria's economy grew very well after oil was first discovered in the 1950s and explored at Oloibiri in the present-day Bayelsa state. Currently, about 2 million barrels per day are taken out. To this end, there is concern about the sustainability of Nigeria's crude deposits. The federal government is expending huge sums and employing 21st century technology to explore national frontier basins on the trail of commercial quantity hydrocarbons, aimed to upward review Nigeria's crude deposits to about 40 billion barrels by the year 2030.
Issue of growing our reserve for socio-economic development of the country definitely is very key. Nigeria is almost before it was about 95% dependent as far as foreign earning is concerned for the country. Now it has reduced because of the coming in of new areas, a new kind of sources of revenue. So definitely growing also the reserve to the 40 billion barrels as we know, and that is the policy of the government, will bring about a kind of increase in revenue source and ultimately in increase in socio-economic development and well-being of the country.
And the lingering standoff between the federal government and some section of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, has taken another turn, with the Accountant General of the Federation insisting on full enrollment by university staff working under the federal government, stating its readiness to implement acts establishing the Integrated Personal Payroll and Information System, IPPIS.
But I have a project that I must execute, and we will execute it to the latter, and not going back. Forget about the propaganda on the social media. We are working and they are enrolling, and time will come when, if you are not there, you just look somewhere, maybe to the group that encourage them not to enroll for their salaries. Only those who we capture finally will be paid salary. Right, no going back. This is government policy. They're employees of government. So what is the big deal? They just must accept it.
Let's now let you see where activities on the first day of trading on the floor of the Nigerian stock market place market indices. Many thanks for having you along on Business News. Be with you again soon.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Newspaper review is next.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoyebe is right here with us in the studios for today's session. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning, Juma. Good morning, Nigeria.
Well, today we begin the review with the Punch newspaper.
Let's see how
punchy. Yeah, just above the masthead we have FG Russian firm signed memorandum of understanding on Ajaokuta, January. That's coming from the minister. You find that on page 24. Ganduje appoints Sanusi as new Emirs Council chairman. The story is on page 8. Electronic collation transmission of results possible in 2023. That's coming from the Independent National Electoral Commission. You find that story on page 19. And beside the masthead, PNID court dismisses Britain's request for bail condition variation. Britain's request for bail condition variation. You find that story on page 18. And Buhari replaces Fowler, appoints Nami as FR's chairman. That story is on page 25. And the bold headlines there, Oshomole's faith. Governors plot to install Buhari's successor. With riders, we can't shut government out, says National Vice Chairman. Governors out, says National Vice Chairman. State chairman's meeting with Buhari to save APC chair. We find that story on page 2. And the picture story there, Speaker Kwara State House of Assembly Saliu Danladi, the State Governor Abdurrahman Abdurrazak, EFCC Zonal Head Ishaku Shauru, and Kwara State Deputy Governor Kayode Alabi, and officials of the EFCC during rallies commemorating the World Anti-Corruption Day in Ilorin and Abuja on Monday. And Edo Assembly writes INEC demands by-elections for absentee members elect. You find that story on page 19. Adama fake doctor backs 10 years imprisonment. That story is on page 8. FCT admin to acquire 600 Abuja abandoned buildings. Well, you find that on page 18. And at the bottom plate of the Punch newspaper, Northern Monarchs meet on security education. That story is on page 7. Estate electrician accomplice attack Max MD, kill wife. You find that story on page 4 and 5. Yes.
All right, I take a look at the front page of the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint, just an earpiece there beside the name flag. Open Treasury portal will build public confidence in governance. That's a quote taken from a story with greater details on page 33. EFCC seizes 643.9 million naira and over $700 million in Kano. Details on page 17. 12 perish in Niger road mishap. We are not at war with governments. That's according to Northern Emirs, and pledge to support governors with good programs. Lead story is on the power sector. It says darkness looms as Gencos and Discos seek 1.2 trillion naira bailout. Senate urges state of emergency. Below the photograph, Buhari replaces Fowler with Nami as FRS chair. Details on page 6. Troops rescued 31 women and kids from insurgents in Borno. Expert seeks Land Use Act repeal. Oshibajo, only humility and personal sacrifice can end intolerance and bigotry. That's page 7. Buhari off to Egypt today for Peace and Development Summit. Details on page 6. Bayo.
Thank you, Kinsley. Well, let's start with the story about anti-corruption. Nigeria joined the rest of the world in marking the International Day of Anti-Corruption yesterday. As part of the activities, marking the day, there was a 21.3 kilometers marathon. Emmanuel Gang from Plateau won the male version, while Deborah Pam Badung, who is the wife of Emmanuel Gang, also won the women race. Emmanuel got 1 million naira for a prize money. The anti-corruption war is a marathon, and it took EFCC an average of 10 to 16 years to get the conviction of 4 former governors for corruption. As at last count, 9 other former governors are in the waiting list and are still in the marathon with EFCC in the courts. Since its establishment in December 2002, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has challenged the impunity of political elites. In 2013 rather, it had 117 convictions. In 2014, there were 120. 2015, 103. 2016, there were 182. In 2017, 189 convictions. And in 2018, there were 302. Twice the confirmation of Ibrahim Magu as chairman of the EFCC failed at the Senate. And this has set up, and since his 3 years in tenure as acting chairman, he has secured 703 convictions in 3 years. A local Hausa musician, as part of his campaign to secure the confirmation of Ibrahim Magu, sang and said that Magu must be selected, Magu must be screened, Magu must be confirmed. And he added very ingeniously, Magu is the medicine of the Magu. Now, let's look at the situation about a correction effected by the Debt Management Office. This is published, I think, in the leadership. The Debt Management Office is setting the record, says Nigeria's debt stock is 83.3 billion. The DMO clarified that Nigeria's debt stock has been misrepresented to be less than 7 billion in 2015. This was raised in a private television program by a former deputy governor of the Central Bank. DMO says that public debt data showed that as at June 30th, 2015, public debt was $63.83 billion, not 7 billion. I was wrongly misrepresented. Between June 2015 and June 2019, debt stock has now risen to 83.88 billion naira. And the Debt Management Office clarified that the debt that has been accrued is not only that of the federal government. It comprises of the 36 states of the federation, the federal government, and the Federal Capital Territory. Why it is also clarifying that it is erroneous to attribute the debt to the federal government only. Nigeria's debt gross domestic project, that is debt to GDP ratio, is currently at 18.99% as at June 2019. Also, the 22.718 billion that is borrowed in the 2019 budget plan that was represented is part of the 2016 to 2018 budget debt request, not a fresh one. So that is setting the facts rate. The other issue of interest is that there is a new man at the helm of affairs as the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Mr. Babatunde Fowler handed over the affairs to the most senior director, the coordinator director for domestic taxes yesterday. This followed the expiration of his term yesterday. While expressing gratitude to President Muhammadu Buhari, Mr. Fowler said the task and the service of the FIRS is not just collecting revenue, but to collect maximum amount for the benefit of all Nigerians. Earlier in the day, the President had forwarded to the Senate the confirmation of a new chairman for the Federal Inland Revenue Services. The President forwarded the name of Muhammadu Nami, a renowned tax consultant, as executive chairman designate. There's also members of the board of the Federal Inland Revenue that are now awaiting confirmation by the Senate. Lagos State Government, State House of Assembly says it has no plan to repeal the state's pension law. In other words, it is not prepared to follow the example of Zamfara State, which repealed the humongous emolument that were paid to governors. The chairman for the Committee on Information and Strategy, Tunde Brimo, says that Lagos will not go the Zamfara way, but Brimo faulted the court ruling that ordered the AGF to act to abolish the state laws. He says that government emoluments were also drawing normal salaries and allowances in political offices were passed legitimately by law, and the law still subsists as far as Lagos State is concerned.
All right. There are not many news stories on the scene. Yeah. But the FRS story is one that is of interest. Yes. The papers that we have seen this morning have reported it accurately. But yesterday, I'm sure if you had access to the social media, you would have seen a deluge of comments and imputations that the FRS chairman was sacked. You know, he has been fired by the president. His tenure expired, and there was no renewal for a second term. And there is no provision in the law that compels the president to renew the appointment of any person whom he has assigned to any office upon the expiration of that term. Even the office of the president is not compulsorily renewable. I mean, he has to approach the electorate again. He has first to indicate his interest that he wants to seek a second term, as we saw in 2019. Former President Goodluck Jonathan attempted that in 2015, and unfortunately, of course, he lost the election, and now you have President Buhari who has won. And it's also important to stress that all appointees of the president, they hold their office at the pleasure of the president.
Yes.
At the pleasure of the president, except in situations where there are constitutional provisions requiring the removal of any such appointee to come with the concurrence of voting in the Senate. So that's the only time that you can have any such situation. But if you hold your office at the pleasure of the president, it means the president, of course, can relieve you of your appointment. Now, in the case of Babatunde Fowler, the immediate past chairman of the FRS, he had concluded 4 years, which was the first term, and there was no renewal, so he wasn't fired. So what is called a fluxion of time is what has played out in the case of the FRS chairman. So, Bayo, that's one point I think we should.
Yeah, it was something really unique to the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Even the National Hajj Commission of recent had a similar situation. The tenure of the chairman chief executive expired, and he had to be there in acting capacity until another person was appointed. It's part of the procedure in public service. But the concern is you raise this issue on the social media. And incidentally, this presidential spokesperson, the special advisor to the president on the media publicity, Garba Shehu, has asserted that allowing the social media to operate without control will result in lawlessness, violence, and death. The senior special assistant media of publicity was speaking at an award ceremony. He said federal government is not opposed to free speech. And he said that, noting that emerging media has always promoted information flow. However, there have been instances where information that goes through the media are traced, and where such are found to be a violation, it is always also redressed. And he cited nations that are making instances at regulating the social media.
All right, Bayo. Thanks a lot. One other story, I'm sure we will have the details, going forward on what the Lagos State government will do. It's about the robbery incident that occurred at Lugard Avenue in Kogi, Lagos. That's a highbrow area. The managing director of Maersk, which is, of course, a big player in the maritime industry, this household was attacked. He's a Cameroonian, and his wife is of Bulgarian origin. Unfortunately, I mean, according to one account, what happened was very bizarre. There was a claim that she was giving the lady that was compulsorily made to drink acid, which eventually led to her death. We do hope that the law enforcement agencies will take this up very seriously and get the matter prosecuted expeditiously. So, Bayo, on that note, we'd like to thank you for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. It's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break. Now, when we return, of course, we'll get ahead with our principal item for discussion.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, Arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
It is indeed befitting to honor the memory of the gallant hearts of young men who paid the supreme sacrifice to keep the country united.
President Muhammadu Buhari enjoins all ministries, parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Meet the dreamer. Meet the stylish. Meet the bold. Meet the inquisitive. Meet the warrior. Meet the master. Meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Unity Challenge. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
Watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And just before we begin our conversation, which is on some state provisions with regard to the pension for former governors and deputies, and in some cases, former speakers and deputy speakers, let's listen to the views of some Nigerians as collated by our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
They should leave the poor masses to benefit instead of using the money they are supposed to give them for allowance or for pension to invest in infrastructure to benefit the masses who are, without pipe-borne water, electricity, and poor housing.
What about those who have served the country for 35 years? The gap is very wide, you know it. So they don't. They have made some money for themselves while in service.
If they are earning based on minimum wage, then it is wise for the government, for the system to give them something after office. But if they are earning more than anybody else, I don't think we have money for pension. I don't think the country have money for pension.
They are public servants. They show that they want to serve the masses. Let them serve with open minds and in fact make a kind of their own contribution and go, not to come and withdraw the final treasury.
My stake is that the government should consider civil servants' pension first. And the committee in charge of the pension, if there is a change that government can just key into, then the payments can be made fast. It will help this government.
Mostly pension is supposed to be for civil servants only.
I don't subscribe to it.
Why?
I don't subscribe to it.
Why didn't you subscribe?
Because first of all, when governance is about service. So if you've been a governor for 4 years, it's because you want to serve. That's why you even contested in the first place. And now the perks of the office which they've earned already while in office is enough for them. Most, like the Senate now, in the Senate, almost more than half of the senators are ex-governors. So they will leave their states, they will go to the Senate and earn more money, and you are earning pension again in the state. It's not fair.
All right, now those were the views of a cross-section of Nigerians interviewed by Kunle Adeyeye, where we have 4 guests with us here in the studios, and once we're able to get our clearance to our network studios in Lagos, we'll also be joined by guests from there. Let's quickly introduce at least 3 of them who are familiar guests on Good Morning Nigeria. First, we'd like to welcome former Senator Osareme Osumbo, Professor of Law, and also former Governor of Edo State. Prof, pleasure to have you with us on Good
My
Morning
pleasure
Nigeria
too.
today.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios, would like to welcome learned senior advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman. Pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
Okay. And another regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, one-time governorship candidate. Perhaps he might have been a beneficiary of this kind of jumbo benefits if he had won his election. Adabu Modibo is also former managing director of Sigma Pensions. Pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay.
Okay, we also have in the studio Honorable Nasru Ma'azu Magaria, Speaker Zamfara State House of Assembly. It's a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria. We equally have here in the studio Okay, that's, I think.
Yeah, well, as I said, if we're able to get our satellite connection to our Lagos Network Center, we'll be able to get in a guest. We're expecting one of the deputy directors from SERAP, which took out the action at the Federal High Court in Lagos to, of course, get the decision that is also part of the prompt for our conversation this morning. But let's just begin by asking our guests in general, what their response is to a matter that has been in the public space for some weeks. So let's begin with Professor Sharima Osumbo. Of course, you are a former senator before you became a former governor, and of course, you remain a professor of law. What's your reaction to what's playing out with regard to, some have described it as a humongous benefits by way of pension that former state governors, deputies, and in some cases, former speakers and deputy speakers are entitled to by laws, some would argue, validly passed by the respective state houses of assembly?
Well, the concern being expressed by Nigerians is understandable, given the economic situation in the country, given the dearth or scarcity of a lot of infrastructure. People are yearning for development, and yet the resources are scarce. And therefore, any effort, attempt, or steps being taken to deplete, as it were, the public funds by way of expenditure into areas that are not seen to be directly impacting on the lives of the ordinary people is viewed with some concern. And even to the extent that some people will regard it as wastage or a luxury which the nation or the states cannot afford. In particular, in some instances, because of the scale, the extent of the benefits that these laws provide for the aforementioned persons, that is governors, deputy governors, and so forth and so on. That because I say this from the basis of a realization that the Constitution itself, which is the basic law of Nigeria, provides for the payment of pensions and gratuities to the president and the vice president to the extent of the remuneration of the incumbents. That is in Section 84 of the Constitution. Section 124 of the Constitution also makes provision for payment to governors and deputy governors to the extent of the law made by the State House of Assembly. As you said, these laws are made legitimately. But the concern is that in many cases, their entitlement is perceived as being excessive in relation to available resources. That is the concern. And I believe we have to address it in this way. And for me, it's always, I'm not sure that many of the critics advert or those who have expressed concern, avert their minds to the provisions of the Constitution, that these things have constitutional basis. And the houses of assembly that prescribe these humongous amounts are the elected representatives of the people. So this boils down to how do elected lawmakers reflect the yearnings and aspirations of their constituents when they make laws. So it's assumed that when the House of Assembly of a state is making laws, they are making laws on behalf of the people of that state. So they should reflect the feelings of the people in that state. And I believe Zamfara state is a very cogent illustration of how a House of Assembly can reflect the mood of the people in that state in prescribing or not prescribing these pensions and gratuities for the aforesaid office holders. Those are my preliminary remarks for the time being.
That's lovely. We now come to Adamu Modubo, former MD Sigma Pension. Let's have your opening comment on.
Thank you very much.
This issue.
As you said, recently we have been faced with this situation, and but I think we should look at it dispassionately from various angles. One, what is the legality of the state houses of assembly passing laws to give incredible amounts of money to governors, deputy governors, and in some cases speakers and deputy speakers pension? As the learned professor said, Section 124 of the Constitution is the provision that provides for that. However, there is a proviso in that section. That section says, is talking about salaries and remuneration, not pension. Salaries and remuneration. And salary and remuneration connote that you are paying a serving officer who is sitting in office, and that is what you are supposed to be paying him monthly or so. And the additional proviso is that it should not be more than what the National Revenue Allocation Fiscal Commission has prescribed. So to me, the Constitution has remained silent as to whether governors and deputy governors should be paid pension. There is a difference between salary and remuneration and then pension. This therefore leads us to the fact that being a federal system, the state has its own independence in terms of any issue that may be, that is not going to be on exclusive legislative list. And therefore, pension is on concurrent legislative list of the Constitution. The state houses of assembly can therefore legislate. So, ordinarily, any law passed by the House of Assembly regulating pension of governors and deputy governors ordinarily can be said to be legal. But is it moral for you to pay a sitting a retired governor 10 million naira every month?
But is he retired?
He has retired. In the case of Zamfara, it was Governor Abdulaziz who complained that he was not being paid, and that was how we got to know.
He wasn't a civil servant in the first place, so he cannot retire.
Okay, so after the expiration of his second term, he became entitled to be paid 10 million naira. You see, under the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation and Fiscal Commission, the salary of the President of the Federal Republic is fixed at 14 million naira per annum. This president has even said that he wants only half of that. How can you come and pay an ex-governor 10 million naira per month, not per annum, per month, when a serving president is collecting 14 million naira per annum? Therefore, there is a need in this country for us to look at the morality of doing that. You may not challenge the legality, but the morality is there. But and you see, these things all stem from borrowing from the private sector. The houses of assemblies, the governors borrowed all this from the private sector. The private sector, any chief executive retiring, they give them what we in the private sector call golden handshake. But you don't give golden handshake to a public servant who did not come to create wealth or come to make profit. In the private sector, the chief executive came to make profit for the company. He can therefore be morally entitled to a chunk of it as a parting gift when he's retired. How about a public servant? So to me, it is immoral to begin to pass laws like this to be giving public servants huge amounts of money as pension. We therefore congratulate the Speaker of the Zamfara State House of Assembly for being courageous, for being bold to come up with this repeal of the law. And this is Zamfara, one of the poorest states in Nigeria, paying 10 million naira per annum in addition to gratuity of over 300 million per month, sorry. Only God knows what is going on in Rivers, Delta, Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, states that are generating a lot of money, or Lagos. Only God knows what is contained in their own pension law for governors. So, to me, I think these are the perspectives and the angles from which we should approach the matter.
All right, thank you very much, Adamu Modibo. Now, let's bring in Yunus Ustaz Usman, lead senior advocate. A number of legal perspectives have been raised with regard to this. Let's have your own opening comments on the issue.
You see, I'll talk very little about the moral aspect because the speaker is here who will talk about that. But let us understand this. Section 70 of the Constitution provides for payment of salaries and allowances to senators and members of the federal, of the House of Representatives. Equally, Section 124, subsection 5 in particular, provides that a state House of Assembly can make laws for the provision of pension to former governors, deputy governors, and so on. That is where the problem comes. Now, unlike Section 84, subsection 5 does not limit the amount of pension to be paid to a former governor. And that's why all the states that were paying jumbo, monthly allowances and so on, legally were correct. Because when in the case of the president, for example, on that section 111 and the third schedule says even the president of the Federal Republic, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, all they are entitled to is when they retire, all they are entitled to is their annual salary. Whereas in the case of states, I'm sure they took advantage of this loophole that on that section 124, subsection 5, there is no such limitation as to what the House of Assembly can do. And so, because almost all the state houses of assembly in the country today are in the pockets of the governors, except maybe Zamfara is coming up now. These governors lure them into doing these things. And of course, there is a constitutional window where there is no limit as to the amount of pension that should be paid. So legally, a state House of Assembly, unless we amend that provision, may be paid any amount that the state House of Assembly says they should be paid. But the problem is this. Section 70 provides that every senator or member of House of Representatives is entitled to salary. If you are entitled to salary, you cannot be collecting pension again. I think that is just the issue. And that is where with my brother, the issue of morality comes in, but then I'm not concerned with morality as such. It simply is that if you juxtapose Section 70 with Section 124.5, then of course you can't be receiving salary as a senator or member of the House of Representatives, and at the same time be receiving, even if it's one kobo, not 10 million a month from the state again. You can't do that. In fact, it's not only immoral, but it becomes criminal.
All right, let us see the advocate. Thank you very much. There are issues here that we are considering. I recall when the Zamfara story first broke, when we were doing the newspaper review, we did indicate that, look, what is afoot may very well turn out to be a part of our pension jurisprudence. So there are a number of issues that have been raised. We'll come back to Professor Osumbo and Adamu Modibo presently. But let's bring in now Honorable Nasiru Muazu Mageria, is the Speaker of the Zamfara State House of Assembly. Your House of Assembly decided to abrogate the very law that triggered this whole conversation with regards to pension benefits and monthly allowance for former governor, former deputy governor, former speaker, former Deputy Speaker. Why did you take this step?
You know, the state have been security problems over 8 to 10 years. Then it is among the poorest states in Nigeria, where the people represented. People elected us into offices to come into power. There is no reason why that we will allow to feed this amount of money for the former governors, former deputy governors, former speaker, and even former deputy speakers, because this amount of money is amounted over 702 million annually. With this amount of money in Zamfara, you can, you understand, do so many things that people of the president will benefit from this sort of amount in respect of the security situation, our educational level situation, health situation in Zamfara State. But Zamfara State has assembly, this assembly that enacted that law. And for now, as I say, we are for the people concerned, not for ours. We come into power, we decided to refill that law because there is no any important on that law to allow Zamfara county to feed that amount of money for the former governors and the former deputy governors. So that's the reason that we let that law in Zamfara State.
You started a storm actually, and it's raging, and it has raised a lot of questions on why people will allow themselves to be derailed away from infrastructure like schools, because this money you mentioned can go a long way in providing medicines in the hospital, road infrastructure, and schools. So now you're a pacer in doing that. Do you think that law has been repealed now? Do you think it will continue maybe after your tenure?
I believe it will continue even after our tenures, because as I told you that we are the people represented. We are not doing it for our own. We are doing it for the people of the state. And I believe they will not allow this to continue. So even if after our own tenures, no things can continue like this in regard to the first situation.
I was wondering, just give us a sense, what was the public mood in Zamfara upon apprehending, that is, seeing that letter that was widely circulated in the social media? It was a leaked letter from the former governor demanding for the arrears of his monthly upkeep allowance and indicating that it was 10 million naira, of course, not any other currency, 10 million naira every month. What was the mood in Zamfara?
People of the president, they are very surprised for that letter for the former governor. He just recent former governor to send that letter seeking for payment of 10 million to him monthly. People are very surprised.
And other privileges too.
And other privileges, not only for 10 million per month. The law said the governors will pay 10 million per month. Then to give him 2 exotic cars. Deputy to pay 5 million with his 2 exotic cars. Speaker 3 million with 1 car. Deputy Speaker 1.5 million with 1 car. So if you calculate the money, it's over. No, the cars is after 2 years.
For those 1.5 million every month.
But every month. Every month, monthly, not annually, as my brother said, not annually, every month. Then if you calculate that amount of money, cash, and this 702,000 millions, how can you compare to Zamfara State to pay that amount of money? And Zamfara, there is insecurity everywhere. Our schools are somehow so low. Our health facilities. If you go to Zamfara State, in short, you will be surprised. But we thank God for now that this administration tried to, push everything like this to make fresh air in Zamfara State. So people are happy for the feeling of law, and they are surprised to see that letter sent by the former governor of Azizari.
All right, thank you very much, current Speaker of the Zamfara State House of Assembly. Let's return to Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, again, in clarifying this for the benefit of our viewers, we talked about the legality of the state laws, which grant the jumbo pension benefits to former governors, former deputies, and in some cases, former speakers and deputy speakers. And the various provisions in the Constitution that have been referred to, I was just wondering, Learned Senior Advocate Yunus Ustaz Usman, drew our attention to the fact that there appears to be, in his opinion, a lacuna which some state houses of assembly have taken advantage of to, as it were, enlarge the components of the pension benefits to those former officers. Is it necessarily the case that such a provision in the Constitution will be read in isolation, or you take a view at the various provisions concerning pensions and emoluments in the first instance, and the purpose of a pension? Is a pension supposed to graduate into some helium that becomes even heavier and weightier than what you earn as a salary?
Well, these are interesting issues, which border on morality or what the people consider acceptable. I recall that even the background clip that was shown, somebody was even saying, once you've earned more than the minimum wage, the issue of pensions and gratuities should not even arise at all. So there are various views that can be canvassed from the angle of morality. But in order that we do not have these varying interpretations of views, that is why we have the Constitution. And the Constitution should guide us, guide everybody, those the beneficiaries and those who have to comment on whether this is appropriate or not. It's always good that our point of reference, first point of reference should be, is this constitutional, is it legal? Which now brings me to address the question that you raised. Again, there are a number of issues that are being confused. There is the question of severance pay. And the severance, as my colleague Modibo mentioned, is the one which the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission sets at 300% of the annual pay. Beyond that is remuneration and salaries of the incumbents, governors and deputies, president and vice president that are on seat. Then there is pension, which is different. Clearly, the Constitution, as the learned SM mentioned, makes provision for pension for life. And in the case of the president and vice president, it is clear, it is defined by the Constitution. So the argument, the confusion arises because of the way Section 124, subsection 5 was drafted, because it gives discretion to the House of Assembly by law to prescribe a pension and gratuity for any person who has held the office of governor and deputy governor, provided the person was not impeached from office, and so forth and so on. Another aspect of the Constitution that we need to avert our mind to, looking at the legality of it all, is the code of conduct for public officers, because that has been entrenched and is part of the Constitution. That one says that, first of all, if an employee, if you are employed, a public officer, you cannot work in more than one place full-time. You can earn your salary full-time in one place, but you can only earn allowance, maybe sitting allowance or whatever from other places. That is one. Then another is a provision for retired pensioners. If you are a pensioner, you cannot earn any other salary or benefit other than one. It limits you to only one other remuneration in a public institution, either public corporation, public government utility, or what have you, limits you to one. But that is section 4 of the Code of Conduct. The section, I think, 13 or 14, now makes exception that all those prohibitions, restrictions do not apply to a lawmaker. So whether you are a councillor, you are a member of the State House of Assembly, you are a member of the National Assembly, you are not affected by those restrictions. In other words, you can earn as many. In fact, the issue arose years back when I was in the Senate as to how many board directorships a senator can occupy. There are senators, of course, who are chairmen of companies, who are directors in companies. How many can you occupy? Under Section 4 of the Code of Conduct, if it's a government company, you cannot occupy more than one. But there are people who are occupying several. So again, we need to look at these provisions of the Constitution and see whether there is any inconsistency in them and how to streamline them. But before we do that, I believe that discretion on the part of the lawmakers is advisable in order that they take into cognizance the mood of the public and not incite, as it were, stir up public animosity against them, because this issue has been burning, and it didn't just start with Zamfara, if I may say, because SERAP instituted this action in 2017, long before the Honorable Speaker and the current Zamfara State House of Assembly came on board. So there are issues. It's interesting. Of course, democracy is work in progress. We can never get all the answers in one day.
Yes.
But once the flaws are detected from time to time, it behoves of lawmakers, and the Zamfara State House of Assembly has shown that they can revisit these issues. By the way, Zamfara State House of Assembly may still need to ask itself whether it wants to act on the basis of Section 124, subsection 5, because that section does give you a responsibility by law to prescribe pensions and gratuities, unless you are now saying that you are not going to make any law to prescribe pensions and gratuities. As I said, these issues are coming up, and as they come up, I believe that informed judgment will be applied in addressing these issues.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, let me clarify this issue which you raised. In constitutional construction, yes, the entire provision will be construed to get the intention. But when there is a clear provision, like the subsections 1 and 5 of section 124, subsection 1 says that in case of salaries and allowances, the revenue mobilization and fiscal policy will fix a limit, and no legislative provision can exceed that limit. Under subsection 5, it did not put that limit, which means that there is not an issue of constraining the entire provision. Both subsections are clear. Subsection 1 is clear. Say yes, the revenue mobilization and fiscal policy can put in a limit. Under subsection 5, there is no such a provision, and you cannot read into a condition a provision that is not there. If, for instance, subsection 1 and 5 left everything to the state, while sections 111 and then chapter 3 will talk generally about provision of pension, that is when you say you have a conjunctive construction. Here,
that is construction for the benefit of our viewers. That is, we are reading it together.
But where one is expressed, yes, in this case, the revenue mobilization can fix a limit. In the other subsection, there is no such provision, and you cannot read into it.
Well, let us senior advocate, I'm not a guest on the program, I'm only a presenter, but I will disagree with you. But that disagreement, I will frame it as a question. And that's going to Adamu Modibo. The core issue there has to do with pension. Pensions. That a State House of Assembly has been donated the powers by the Constitution, subsection 5 of 124, to make laws with regard to the pension or gratuity benefits of a former governor or a former deputy governor. Adamu Modibo, what is the basis for computing a pension? From what we have seen, yes, I mean, people are quarreled about the extent of it. You say a former governor will earn so much. A former governor will be entitled to a house, one in the state capital, another one in Abuja. A former governor will be entitled to so many domestic staff, he will be entitled to medical allowances. And so, what is the basis for calculating a pension?
The Constitution has not provided the basis. So, therefore, legally and constitutionally, the House of Assembly, so to speak, is free to determine what they think is fair to pay to the governor or the deputy governor. Subsection 5, as the learned senior advocate stated, subsection 5 of section 124 has excluded a statement saying not exceeding in subsection 1 of that same section. It is therefore arguable, or it can be argued, that since subsection 5 has excluded that statement but not exceeding, it means that the lawmakers, the makers of the Constitution, wanted the issue of pension limit to be different from the limit imposed on remuneration and salaries. This is the argument the learned senior advocate said. So that is why initially...
I'm sorry. Let me restate my question. But my question has to do with the whole idea of a pension. What is not the necessary constitutional provision now to say, since the Constitution has not defined what a pension is, what is the whole idea of a pension? I mean, I know for how many years I have worked, but if I worked for only 8 years, minus several decades ago, what would I be entitled to? What is the idea of a pension?
So, can I also help you?
Yes.
It's why the framers of the Constitution make provision for payment of pension. Those who framed the Constitution, why did they make provision for payment of pension?
Okay, as I said...
Can it be revisited, this issue?
Quantitatively, there is no basis for computing pension as provided in the Constitution. However, one can assume that the reason why subsection 5 of section 124 is there is maybe to entice governors and deputy governors to be less corrupt, or not to be corrupt in office, to think that yes, since I have a very fat pension and gratuity, I will make sure that I am not corrupt, and so on. This may be the only explanation for subsection 5. But the question is, the earlier point the learned senior advocate said is that, or the decision of the Lagos High Court, or the Federal High Court in Lagos, that you cannot take salary in the Senate and then take pension as governor. I believe it should not be generalized. For instance, there are so many politicians holding public office and taking salary and remuneration, but their previous job was not governor or senator, for them to be enjoying subsection 5 of section 124. For instance, you may be a general in the army, like our president. He served for so many years in the military, and he is taking his pension from the military. Because he is president, elected president now, and he is taking salary from the office of the president, are you saying that we should disentitle him from his pension from the military? Serving in the military or in the civil service for 35 years to entitle you to pension and gratuity is different from being a governor for 8 years and then collecting 1 billion naira or 10 million naira every month as pension and gratuity. So these are things that we should take into account. So the summary is, legally speaking, and that is why I avoided the issue of legality. Legally speaking, you may not fault the governors from collecting the monies that were prescribed by the laws enacted by the Houses of Assembly in pursuance.
Which are in their pockets.
Which are in their pocket.
Yes.
I agree. But you cannot prove that.
But you agree.
I agree, but you cannot prove it. So these laws were made in pursuance subsection 5 of section 124. So it's purely constitutional and legal, because subsection 5 did not put limit like subsection 1 of section 124. Therefore, you can argue that. But let us move the argument to the spheres of morality. And a civil servant can rise from the position of immediately after NYC up to Federal Permanent Secretary. He worked for 35 years. He is entitled to, say, 700,000 naira every month as his pension. Then you come and be a governor for 8 years and then earn 10 million naira every month. To me, is immoral.
You know, there's a lot of things hidden in the law that may know when they set these laws in the House of Assembly, Is it public? Was there a public sitting for people to know, like the electorate, to know that at the end of his tenure, a governor is collecting 10 million?
No,
because
but
I believe if there was
before you pass a law, is not a condition precedent
yes,
to
it's not
legalizing
a condition.
the passing of a law.
It's not a condition, but is the public allowed to know that such a law exists?
No, the fact that the law is passed has become a public document. So the public is entitled to know, and they can know. There is this Freedom of Information Act. So
yes.
if you want, you can go there and ask for the information you know.
The public usually knows. These things make news.
How many in the... just give me a percentage of people who know about the law.
I'm just wondering, senior advocate, yes. This is the point I would like us to address. I mean, if you consider it important, you can elaborate on it. What is the idea of a pension? If you do not find the meaning of a pension in the interpretation section of the Constitution, can you not seek aid from any other source to define what a pension is, so that you have an idea of what it is? There are two issues we are dealing with here. One, entitlement to pension or gratuity, as it were, and then the other of a double pay, which Professor Osumba has already explained, even though there is also another issue that we are going to raise with regard to that. If you say, okay, pay them a pension, so what is the idea of a pension? What is the idea? The Constitution doesn't define it. Can you not look for the meaning of a pension elsewhere? Say in the public service, what is the idea of a pension? And therefore, how would you calculate a pension?
For the first time, you and I will now agree. Now, when the Constitution does not provide, or if a legislation does not provide a definition of an article or a provision, you can now go to the Interpretation Act or any other aid. In this case, the Black's Law Dictionary defines pension as pensionary. That is, as something you use as a cushioning effect after leaving office. So you can construe that into the constitutional provision, since it is not expressly there. So you are right. You don't need to restrict yourself to the Constitution. You can go outside elsewhere to get the definition. That is what Prof taught us. Now, that is, I agree with you in that aspect for the first time. Now, the other aspect, all these things have now been settled by that judgment of the Federal High Court. Until that is set aside on appeal, the provision today, the law today is, irrespective of the provisions of subsection 5 of section 124, is that all laws made by state houses of assembly as regards payment of pensions to governors are illegal. That is the stand of the Federal High Court. You will say it's the Federal High Court, but unless it's challenged on appeal, that is the law.
Let's clarify this. What the Federal High Court, certainly in Lagos, decided was on the basis of double take or double pay.
Double pay, yes.
And then it now gave an order of mandamus to the Attorney General of the Federation to pursue constitutional interpretation of the validity of the state enactments with regard to pension benefits, for former governors and deputies and so on and so forth. It is those who are former governors who are earning pension from their states on account of a law, and also earning from either the Senate or earning as ministers. That is the one that the High Court struck down and said that is illegal. But for the other one, it has now said, look, in that particular one, Attorney General of the Federation proceed to recover those monies from such former governors who are either ministers or are senators. But for the validity of the state pension laws, seek constitutional interpretation from the courts. So I think that's where the issue, which brings us back to the question of the double pay, which Professor Osumba was trying to explain earlier. Zamfara Speaker.
Zamfara State as House Assembly was enacted this law. And this law, even though the provision of the Constitution remains silent much on this regard. But what we do now as we are repealing the law would not go violate the provision for the National Revenue and Mobilization Commission. Although the former governors, former deputy governors, they are entitled to have this some amount. But if the governors, the former governors, are those ones that force the assembly to enact the laws to feed this jumbo fare after they leave the office for their benefit. And secondly is that as we are now come, we discover that there is no reason why that somebody can force the assembly as elected by different representatives of the state to enact a laws for the benefit of either individual or group of people. No, that should be it. Seen the provision as there clearly. So that is the reason that we refute that law.
What has made this possible? I mean, let's also look at the politics of it. I mean, we know what happened on the eve of the general elections this year. The fact that this, shall we say, the strongest party in the state was in turmoil and couldn't put its house in order. And then you had, as some persons would say, default victory, as it were, for the others. Assuming it were the other way around, might this have been possible? Assuming, it was the same party that is very strong in the state, would they have repeated the law?
No, as I told you earlier, we are doing for the benefit of the people, not for either the strong party, we are the strong party of the state, no. Whatever the party we are coming from for this time around, considering the situation of the state for the over 10 years insecurity situation, we will not allow such things to continue. You must make sure that we will refill that law and we will allow the former governors to have their entitlement already provided by them as the provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So we are just doing irrespective of any political party, just for the good mood of the good people of the president and the situation. Currently, that's the reason why I do it.
Okay, now that you've repealed the law, what next?
After we repeal the laws, now the mood of the people of the president are now, if it comes now. And I believe the development of the state, it will continue based on this amount. We are going to take this amount of money to maybe schoolings, health facilities, addressing security issues. There is no reason for, if former governor for 8 years, he cannot be able to pay minimum wage, he cannot be able to address security challenges, he cannot be able to address educational situation, and at the end of the day, me getting this amount of money. So people of the president now are happy for what the president has.
What about the pensioners?
The pensioners
that have not been paid for a long time.
He don't even pay for the pensioners for a long time. Yes. Even the pensioners. And now this amount of money can be paid some many people, pensioners, their pensioners.
Kinsley, let's distill these issues. Let's break them down. You see, Zamfara State House Assembly, to me, has done a good job, but they have shot themselves in the foot. They are in clear violation of subsection 5 of section 124. It's an entitlement. Under that provision, the governors and the deputy governors are entitled to be given pension based on a law passed by the House of Assembly. If Abdulaziz Yari did not write that letter to the governor, would we have found ourselves today in Zamfara that that law has been repealed? The House of Assembly might not have repealed that law, might not have repealed that law if Abdulaziz had not written that letter. So, to me, there is a need for us to argue from the platform of morality. Zamfara state government has to have a law in pursuance of subsection 5 of section 124 to pay pension to governor and deputy governor. The bone of contention should be the amount, not the existence of a law to pay pension. And then on the Lagos High Court judgment,
Federal High Court.
Federal High Court judgment in Lagos, I think any further challenge to that judgment at the higher court may produce a different result. The court struck down the law of the states that they should not pay pension while somebody is collecting another salary, like the Senate, the former governors who are in the Senate.
Or ministers.
Or former ministers. Is so blanket. And that is why I brought the earlier example. How about if somebody was a permanent secretary worked for 35 years, will you still say he is collecting another salary, therefore you should strike down his pension?
But
that he
that's
has worked
different.
for. Under the pension law of the federal, like the code of conduct that he is talking about, he's also entitled to all that. So are you saying the two laws are contradictory? Did the Constitution expressly say that you should not take a new salary in the Senate if you had worked as a civil servant or as a soldier collecting salary in that day? So these are all areas that we think the lawyers should take up the matter at the Superior Court and get further clarification.
Well, that's the pension jurisprudence issue that we've been talking about, I believe. But I don't know. Well, I'm tempted to say that you are moving away from one issue, one vital issue. Yeah. Let's look at numbers. Numbers, because that is the crux of the matter. Indeed, I should also admit that the moral perspective you bring relates to the numbers. By the time you compute the cost of the benefits to be paid out as pension to former governors, deputies, and so on and so forth, everybody will say, oh yeah, this is alarming. You mentioned the practice in the private sector, say in in corporations or private companies, where an executive is exiting and he gets a golden handshake. But you're also aware that in corporate governance, executive compensation is a major issue. Especially, we have seen instances during the time that companies were folding up like an accordion about 10 years ago in the US, and some of those executives, excuse me, were being signed off on tens of millions of dollars when people were jobless. And you of course, you heard the uproar. The question, therefore, is, what is the basis for computing in general gratuity or pension? I've asked that question before. Is your pension supposed to be fatter than the salary you earned?
Okay.
As you say it goes, the person who has retired, God granted him more life. So almost close to the departure lounge.
There are two issues here, Kingsley. Yes. One, in the private sector, the issue of the quantum of pension you take as a parting gift or a golden handshake only becomes an issue if you are leaving behind an unviable corporation. If the corporation is viable, nobody talks about what the chief executive takes as a golden handshake when he's going. So again, it is a moral issue. There is no way you can take $100 million like is happening in US when the company you are leaving behind does not make that amount of money. So it's a moral issue. So the same thing here. How can you be a governor for 8 years? Come and be collecting pension of 10 million naira every month. What is it that you have contributed in Zamfara that can entitle you to 10 million naira every month when, as the speaker said, people have security challenges, no health care, no education, no nothing. So it's a moral issue. Coming back to the issue of, the second issue is the issue of public service. Public service entitlement is even better than what is obtained in the private sector or what is obtained at the state level for governors and deputy governors in pursuance of the provision of section 124.5. Because the pension regulations has prescribed that if you work for 10 years, you are entitled to there's a criteria, you are entitled to so amount of money as gratuity, so amount of money as pension. If you work for 20 years or for 30 years or for 35 years, this formula or kind of regulation is there. But in the case of a governor or a chairman or MD of a corporation, a successful corporation, it is just at the whims and caprices of the House of Assembly in the case of a governor or the board of directors in the case of the corporation. There is no formula, there is no guideline, there is no anything. It's all again in the realm of morality. What is going to be morally defensible is what, to me, the House of Assembly should prescribe for governor. If a permanent secretary, which is the highest position a public servant can take in a state, is earning 700,000 naira, you can say the governor should take 1 million naira. It's reasonable. Nobody would have challenged that. And another thing is that we have to look at is, over time, if you allow such thing that is happening now, over time, the states will all be bankrupted.
Yes.
They can't afford to pay. I will give you an example. In my own state, for instance, we have about 4 or 5 living ex-governors and maybe equal number of deputy governors. If you are going to pay them that amount of money, the substantial portion of the state revenue will be going to pay ex-governors only. You may not even have enough money to pay salaries and so on. So, cumulative effect of it is that over time, if people live longer, if these governors live longer, and because they are well-to-do, they may live longer.
I don't think it determines.
Exactly. So you are going to pile heavy financial burden on the state. Again, it's a moral argument. We should not therefore allow this thing to happen. And we may not win the argument like the learned senior advocate will wish to have if we dwell too much on the legal aspect. Legally speaking, these governors, you have to pay them salary under Section 5 of Section 124. Zamfara State government is in contravention of that section. So
I don't want to appear fixated on this. I don't want to appear fixated on this.
Unless if that provision is amended by the
that's fine.
by the process.
I don't want to appear fixated on this. The core point I'm driving at, I mean, if I had the privilege of being on the bench when deciding on the matter of this nature, the issues I will raise, as part of the ratio for my decision would be, all right, the Constitution or the relevant law already talks about the salaries, emoluments, and allowances that you would earn. That's what you get. That's what you have been earning as over an 8-year period or over a 35-year period as you get scaled up, and you are in service. Why then would your pension suddenly come and it becomes a 7/4 or 787?
It's a moral argument, Kingsley. There is no provision in the law which you must exceed.
Sorry. At the moment, as a judge, you also make the law.
Yes. No, but more law and morality are not the same.
Look, there is a provision for it that is in respect of the president and vice president. And what it says, that is subsection 5 of section 124. And 14.
Of 114.
Yes, it says, like you just said. Yes. Sorry, 84.5. Any person who has held office as president or vice president shall be entitled to pension for life at a rate equivalent to the annual salary of the incumbent or vice president. That is what you have been saying. Which means for the president, vice president, you can't earn more than your annual salary as a pension. And I'm sure that is why the judge of the Federal High Court, he might have taken this into consideration in giving that judgment. I think, like you said, morally, which I don't want to dwell on it. That is
morality
for you.
has to come into this discourse.
Forget about morality first. The issue is
it has to come in.
The issue is for the president and vice president. Yes, there is a scale. Even for the justices and chief justice of Nigeria, there is a scale. The question we have to ask ourselves.
The devil is in
subsection 5 of section 124. Why did they leave that? If the whole president cannot earn more than his annual salary as pension, why should the governor earn 10 million
every month?
With other benefits?
Two houses. Two houses.
Yes. In Abuja.
Travel.
One in Abuja, one in the state capital.
And international travels.
And international travel too.
Yes.
So there is a need to look at section 124.
We'll come back to the discussion. But we need to take a break now. When we come back, the discussion continues. Don't go away.
My name is Balaunti. I'm the Managing Director of Petroleum Product Marketing Company, a subsidiary of NNPC. There are significant price discrepancy between Nigeria and its neighbors across Africa. There's a discrepancy of between 150 to 250 naira. That creates an incentive for arbitrage, whereby smuggling triumphed by taking petroleum products across the neighbors so that they can be sold at higher price. While the smugglers are making the money, Nigeria is paying for it. And that payment is distorting everything that we do in terms of planning, in terms of our ability to fund, and thereby taking money that is meant for development. The introduction of this operation-wide will have reduction of close to 6 million liters on daily basis, which if you take an average of 150, translate to a saving of over ₦1 billion every day. That is the benefit of Operation White, and we have started seeing the great benefit.
To they disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. I don't talk, say, I know they do it again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make they stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go they stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're still on Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, we have a torrent of tweets from our viewers on this very interesting subject matter. All our four guests are still with us here in the Abuja studios. Jumain, let's quickly go through the tweets and then return to our guests.
You know, Raji Afiz Abedimi tweets, on the issue of entitlement of past governors, I think it's too jumbo. Everybody should do something fast to it so that it will reduce cost of our states. God bless Nigeria.
Francis Obi, now this matter should be discussed by all stakeholders and jointly agreed on, but should not be paid upfront to the governor before leaving office. Personally, I would recommend that only governors that have done so well should be paid. Now, how do you judge those who have done so well?
Yes. And Innocent Yawal James tweets, entitlement for former governors is nothing but a scam against ordinary Nigerians. After serving as governor, they retire as senator or minister. Things are happening in Nigeria.
Festus Akimboewa, retirement benefits are for people who have worked for over 30 years and are tired. Jumbo retirement entitlements for governors who only serve for 8 years maximum is corruption, and the legislation backing the jumbo entitlements should be repealed across Nigeria. It's obscene. And
Comrade Alhaji Ngala tweets, they do not deserve entitlement because our pensioners and all retirees are suffering.
The election of anybody to the post of governor, and indeed any other key political post, should be treated as temporary. They should only get variance pay once and for all on a fixed percentage.
And as Filani tweets, in my opinion, I don't think they deserve a single penny after leaving office because the amount they've been paid and the other money they got should be enough for them to live a good life. Let the masses enjoy democracy.
Usman Banikantu tweets, the severance gratuity for ex-governors under whatever guise is uncalled for. This is more or less organized daylight robbery. Therefore, the federal government should initiate the process of repealing the laws without further delay.
Muttana Farouk tweets, entitlement for former governors is a cock and bull story to a fragile economy like that of Nigeria. It's a syndrome of economic malpractice to be perpetual in swimming in a corrupt premises of the political arena. The masses are suffering. Where is our conscience?
Now, this is coming from Umar. Civil servants should be considered first. Governors have so much money already that they should just go home with whatever they got.
And Chris Simon tweets, politics is the main reason why Nigeria remains like this. The wealth of this country are taken by few individuals. Politicians are milking the country dry.
Now, this is coming from Senator Godwin Sesuk. He said people should ask their legislative representatives who give them the nod to pass such immoral laws without public consultation with them. If possible, to protest for it to be repealed.
Omobola Hambab's tweets, it's not only preposterous but also grotesque to give somebody who offers to serve the public by begging for votes for a maximum of 8 years to be given pension for life. If anything, the severance packages given to them on leaving office should be okay. It is an insult to the masses.
Dele Jack Solomon tweets, now concerned Nigerians should we continue to pray that the allowances of legislative members be reviewed and those funds should be pumped into the economy. And for the former executives hold official position after their tenure ends, they should be stripped of any such benefits.
And yes, we have Leo Fad Edward Okay. He said, Mohammed Nyadima, entitlement for governors should be the same across the state in accordance with our country economic capability. Yes.
Okay, now this is from Amin Dalhatu. He says, I kept wondering how these former governors kept shining as if they are still in power. Even as senators or ministers, they are shining too much.
And we still have tweets coming in. Edward Okoro, good conversation. There is need for the legislature to make a holistic review of the constitution because many executives take advantage of loopholes. However, your efforts are commendable, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Leo Padaka, law is made for man and not man made for law. Jumbo pension for ex-governors is counterproductive and unacceptable in a country where poverty is a first address of citizens. Kudos to Zamfara for taking the lead.
And Abudu Sunday Muiwa, our constitution should be amended to eradicate pension for governors and their deputies. That is the only way we can come out of this political quagmire.
Cletus Ugele is illegality and corruption at the highest level.
Law Alpha C tweets, these entitlements are morally unjustifiable, taking into account that some of these governors are in the habit of finding reasons to owe their workers.
Akunle Sharon, good morning Nigeria. Entitlement, gratuity, pension or any such nomenclature you get is much more than unpalatable from the ex-governors that collect such.
Ibrahim Modi tweets, all these former governors have pocketed even the state legislatures to perpetuate such impunity. That so-called entitlements talk more of the present governor. It's right time for revenue mobilization and allocation of fiscal commission and the National Assembly to wade in and stop this impunity.
All right, but I must say, Adamo tweets, the law is a product of the bourgeoisie. Meanwhile, the bourgeois are always maintaining the status quo, leaving the downtrodden masses, that's also the proletariat, with their labor for survival.
And DY Nigeria Limited tweets, these entitlements are absolutely ridiculous. If anyone wants to see how inhuman Nigerian political classes are, the political pensions for life is a good example. And yet pensioners who have spent almost their lives serving the country still have their pensions unpaid.
All right, this is coming from Jessica Okuri. And the tweet is, today's conversation is beyond me. It's all about laws and constitution, sections and subsections. It's confusing. Already my head hurts. I'm just a poultry farmer. My contribution is that Nigerians should always do the right thing for the betterment of all. Thank you.
And AK Bohan, just imagine a state having up to 10 to 20 past serving governors and their deputies, speakers and deputies. How would the state survive? The governors presently find it difficult to pay their workers' salary, promotion arrears, provision of in-service training. This is chaotic.
Now, this is coming from a Twitter handle. That's the last we're going to take this time. It's high five. I reason well with Mr. Adamu Modibo, but if I may ask, how is the pension fund generated? I think workers make their contributions to such fund. Do governors also contribute?
Mr. Modibo, please reply.
Under the Section 124 of the Constitution, they don't contribute.
Somebody said the Constitution is making head blow.
No, that's what I'm saying. But it's the ground law that every governmental action emanates from the Constitution. Yeah. You cannot do away with the Constitution.
Yes, exactly.
It's the ground rule of everything about governance and so on. Yes. So, but they don't contribute like other public servants or civil. They don't contribute. But because of the way that section that provides for pension under the Constitution is couched. So it is appropriated and it comes out of the coffers of the state government. So they don't contribute.
I just wanted, Professor Osunbo, I know you've been itching to say something, but whatever you would like to say, I would like us to return to the clarification you made earlier, because you also brought in the Code of Conduct schedule into this whole conversation, which now relates to the double take. that a former governor who is already earning this jumbo pay becomes a minister, is also earning on the basis of being a minister. Is a senator, is also earning on the basis of being a senator or a former deputy governor who is in the Senate. You were talking about entitlement to not more than one appointment. We're wondering, does that apply to all persons who are necessarily in public service, or to those who would have spent the mandatory 35 years in service or attained the age of 60 before retiring, or if you were in the judiciary 65 or 70 years?
That's the issue I raised earlier.
Prof.
Well, first, very quickly, let me say the last question which you asked. The payment is not from contributions, it's from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, either of the Federation or of the state. That is where all this public expenditure derives from. Then, before I answer the question, let me also, you had asked a question earlier as to why pensions should be paid at all. Why is it necessary to pay pension? That is a fundamental question that Nigerians should begin to address at this time. Why does the Constitution provide for payment of pension? I think the reason, because somebody was saying, one of those, and including somebody who sent a tweet, that the governors and these people have already made enough money from their position, so there's no need to pay them anything anymore. It's an assumption, a presumption that once you are there as a governor, as a president, you can, by hook or crook, make all the money that you need for the rest of your life. I think that is a wrong attitude to take. Just like the generalizations that some Nigerians make that, oh, all politicians are thieves, all politicians are crooks. I don't like those generalizations. We must make provision for exceptions. There are exceptions. There are governors that people, and former governors who people know were people of integrity. At least so far, many years after they left office, they don't even know EFCC. EFCC has never had any occasion, or ICPC, to invite them. So we must make allowance for those kind of people. Yes, it may be there are some that have emptied the state coffers into their own, and then you question, why should we be paying them a pension again? The reason might be the argument, first of all, to prevent that temptation to steal or to loot. The same logic informs pension to public servants, civil servants, that they should serve diligently in confidence that when they retire, the state will also take care of them. That is the logic behind this, that the president or vice president should be assured that when they leave office, they will continue to draw their salaries equivalent to that of the incumbent president or vice president. If you accept that logic up to that extent, then you can understand why the same logic is transposed to the office of governor and deputy governor. What is good for the president and vice president at the federal level should also be good for the governor and deputy governor at the state level. Provided now the formula which hopefully should emerge from this debate is what the learned SCN has said, that even when they do so, it should not be bigger or larger than what the current incumbent governor, deputy governor is taking. So that should serve as a good guide to the houses of assembly.
So with what is on the table now, do you see a drastic shift in the political landscape now?
I don't see it. I don't see it because for this issue is one for state houses of assembly. We operate a federal system. Yes. Even this directive that the Attorney General of the Federation should question,
can be challenged,
should begin to question the legitimacy of laws passed by the houses of assembly of the state is very dangerous. We are looking at it from...
It's not a question that should seek legal interpretation as to the validity of those laws.
Yeah, so you are questioning the validity. I think we'll be treading on dangerous grounds. Kingsley,
yes,
if a federal attorney general will now, after this, maybe he will start pension. Tomorrow, he would go and challenge another law validly passed by the State House of Assembly, will be treading on very dangerous grounds. So I think we shouldn't
let me even tell you why.
You would not say that they will not pay the entitlements the former governors for the former deputy governors at all. But this law is enacted by the State Assembly.
I'm not questioning that at all.
And
finally,
let me
just, as a final point, mention that even Lagos State House of Assembly has said that they will not repeal, they will not change their own, they will not repeal it. And in a federation, you must respect the constitutional authority of a State House of Assembly to make laws of the state. Once you begin to challenge it at the federal level, then you are digging at the very foundation of our federal system.
What if the people say they don't want the law?
Now, this is part of the judgment, where the judge said, I believe the Attorney General can institute an action in the court of law to challenge state pension laws for former governors. But the issue is it is dangerous. Attorney General of the Federation is Attorney General of Nigeria, but the states are independent to some extent.
These laws are man-made.
Just hang on. What danger are we talking about? State governments have taken federal government to court, and the court on certain issues, planning laws, for instance. Who has authority for planning? So what is dangerous about it? It's about the fact that the federal government to a state government can sue a federal government.
That is not what the court is saying.
What is the court saying?
What the court is saying is this. The court is saying, look, that you as Attorney General of the Federation, if the law made by the state is anti-people, that you can now go to court that law should be quashed.
I'm sorry, let us say that because you are enlarging.
Very important point. That is, if you notice, earlier in my argument, I made indirect reference to this judgment. Pension under the 1999 Constitution, as amended, is on the concurrent legislative list, meaning the federal government and indeed the state government, or the National Assembly and indeed the state houses of assembly can legislate. And it is because of this
concurrently
this nature of our presidential system that that we came up. I came up on this.
You know what, gentlemen.
That is why subsection 5 gave absolute power to the houses of assembly.
Just wait. I come back again to this. I will describe it myself as fixation, which is the basis for calculating a pension. What is salary?
We have answered that.
It has already been answered. So I know. I want to use that one as an analogy to what Modibo just said. That because it is on the concurrent list, then states can run wild.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm the one making that. I'm the one making that extrapolation. States can run wild. If states can run wild, how many state governments are paying more than the federal structure?
Yes.
Workers who are in service. All right, so that's one leg. We'll leave that.
But let me finish.
All right, gentlemen.
Let me finish that.
Just before we wrap up. Yeah. The other, I'm sorry, I will use this expression. The other devil in the detail, because we'll be talking about governors and deputy governors. There are also speakers and deputy speakers. And you know, I'm sorry, with the greatest respect to the honorable speaker here, your members overthrow you very easily. So what duration do you need to have served before you become entitled to the pension? If you are a speaker for 1 day, does that entitle you to it? You are a speaker for 1 week, does that entitle you to it? Otherwise, you can, all of you just go outside the table, just be doing this for 1 month, impeach, and then the money becomes so.
No, they said speaker is entitled, but if he's not impeached, when he's complete at least his first tenure, 4 years, he's entitled to have this. It's not a matter that I'm a speaker today, tomorrow I'll be impeached, then I have entitled for that.
Suppose he resigns on his own.
Yeah, I suppose to resign.
Yes.
If he resigns on his own, so I want to become a floor member.
Even if I resign on my own, I will not entitled for it. Unless I completely face tenure continue for the period of 4 years.
All right.
That's
but the Constitution only says if you are impeached, provided that he was not impeached.
If you are impeached, you are not entitled
Yes.
to.
Other than that, you are entitled. Or except the state law.
I
also.
said resignation.
Yes.
I just say, okay, look, I'm a member of the House of Assembly. I'm not from Zamfara, but I assume I'm a member of your house. And then we decide to remove you. Then I become the speaker.
Yeah.
Then after some time, the other members will say, you know, Kingsley, your own don't do. So I say, okay, gentlemen, I want to step down so I become a floor member. Will I not be entitled?
Okay, now,
you are not entitled. If you are resigning, you are not entitled to.
If at the end of your closing remarks, how can these governors be appreciated without the jumbo package?
Yes, it's a question of degree, as I said. It's a question of degree, and the fundamental logic and rationale must not be lost sight of. The need to ensure that a governor who is serving has that assurance that he will not go into penury when he leaves office. And the society also expects a lot from a former governor. I go to functions as a former governor, and people expect me to make, they invite me as chief launcher, but I tell them I will attend your event, but I cannot be chief launcher. But people expect that once you are a former governor,
you have to give money.
You are loaded.
You are loaded.
Somebody, I was flying economy once, and somebody from my state saw me. I said, don't disgrace us. You are a former governor of this state. You cannot be flying. You know, those impose a lot of pressures on people. And the fact that you are paying, getting pension assists you to overcome some of those pressures.
Well, gentlemen, that's the where we're going to draw the curtain this morning. But just to indicate that pension rights for civil and public servants are also guaranteed in the Constitution. And we'd like to thank Professor Sareme Osumbo, a two-term senator and also former governor of Edo State, for your contribution to our very interesting discussion this morning. Adamu Modibo, former managing director, Sigma Pensions, and a one-time governorship candidate in Adamawa. He missed the pension stuff by a whisker. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. Appreciation also to the learned senior advocate Yunus